Imagine waking up on a random Tuesday morning. Nothing special. No alarm earlier than usual. No big life event. Just another weekday. You make your coffee, still half asleep, and like you sometimes do out of habit, you open your investment app. You're not checking because you expect anything exciting. You're just scrolling, killing time. And then you notice something strange. Yesterday, while you were at work sitting in meetings, answering emails, staring at a screen for 8 hours straight, your portfolio went up $412. You pause for a second. You do the math in your head. Yesterday's paycheck after taxes came out to about $320, and that's when it hits you. Your money made more than you did. Not in theory. Not over the long term. Not in some abstract retirement projection. Yesterday, while you were busy working, your money quietly outperformed your labor. At first, you try to brush it off. Markets fluctuate. Maybe it was just a good day, a fluke, but then it happens again and again, and suddenly you realize something deeply unsettling. If you didn't show up to work tomorrow, you would still make money. Not enough to live on yet, not enough to quit, but enough that the hierarchy has started to shift. The lines are getting closer. Your money is starting to work harder than you are. This moment has a name. It's called the crossover point. And here's the thought that keeps most people awake at night once they understand it. The vast majority of people will work for 40 or 45 years and never even know this moment exists. They'll trade time for money until their body gets tired. Then they'll hope Social Security and whatever scraps they manage to save are enough to survive, not thrive, survive. But there's another path, not a motivational one, not a hustle mantra, a mathematical one. A point you can calculate, a date that actually exists on the calendar. And once you understand it, every dollar you earn and every dollar you spend starts to look very different. If you feel like you're running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up, if you're obsessed with freedom but overwhelmed by vague financial advice, this is one of the most important concepts you'll ever learn. So if this video helps you, make sure you're subscribed, because today we're not talking about budgeting apps or cutting lattes. We're talking about the exact moment you win the game of capitalism. Here's what makes the crossover point so powerful. It's not a mindset. It's not a philosophy. It's not manifesting abundance. It's math. You have two financial lines in your life, and they're both moving whether you pay attention or not. The first line is your expenses, what it costs you to live. Rent or mortgage, food, transportation, insurance, everything. The second line is your investment income, what your money earns for you without your direct labor dividends, interest, appreciation. For most people early on, that second line is basically flat. Maybe a few dollars a month. Nothing impressive. But compound interest doesn't move in straight lines. It moves slowly, then faster, then suddenly. And the crossover point is the exact moment when that second line rises above the first. When the money your portfolio generates exceeds what you need to live. When work becomes optional. Not because you're rich, but because the math finally flipped in your favor. And once you see how close or far you really are from that point, you'll never look at your job, your spending, or your future the same way again. Now let's put some real numbers on this, because this is where things stop being motivational and start being uncomfortable. Let's say your monthly expenses are $4,000. Rent, utilities, food, transportation, insurance, life, nothing fancy. That's $48,000 a year just to exist. There's a rule of thumb in finance called the 4% rule. It's the idea that you can safely withdraw about 4% of a well-diversified investment portfolio every year without running out of money over the long term. So if you need $48,000 a year to live, how big does your portfolio need to be? About $1.2 million. That number right there is your crossover point. Not a dream, not a vibe, a number. And I know exactly what your brain just did. It recoiled. Bobby, be serious. I'll never have $1.2 million. That reaction is normal. It's also misleading. Because most people massively misunderstand how long this actually takes and, more importantly, what they can control. So let's walk through a very average scenario. You're 30 years old. You make $60,000 a year. You invest $500 a month. Your investments grow at an average of 8% per year, which is actually below long-term stock market averages. After 10 years, at age 40, you'd have roughly $90,000. At a 4% withdrawal rate, that generates about $300 a month. Not impressive. Nowhere near enough, The lines aren't even close. This is where most people quit, because progress feels invisible. But keep going. After 20 years, at age 50, you'd have around $275,000. Now your investments generate about $900 a month. Still not enough, but the gap is closing faster. After 25 years, you're at about $430,000. That's roughly $1,400 a month passively. And here's where the curve starts to bend. After 30 years, at age 60, you'd have around $670,000. Now you're generating more than $2,000 a month without working. You're not free yet, but you're no longer fragile. And if you keep going at the same pace, you hit that $1.2 million crossover point right around traditional retirement age. Now you might be thinking, so what? I invest for 35 years and retire at 65. Big deal. And here's where everything changes, because that entire scenario assumes you only pull one lever. Most people think the crossover point is only about growing investments. It's not. It's about two moving lines, your investment income line and your expense line. And here's the part almost nobody understands. Reducing your expenses moves the crossover point from both directions. If your monthly expenses drop from $4,000 to $3,000, your crossover number doesn't stay at $1.2 million. It drops to $900,000. You just erased $300,000 from your target. That's not motivation. That's leverage. And if your expenses are lower, guess what else happens? You can invest more. Now instead of $500 a month, maybe you invest $1,000. At $1,000 a month, 8% returns, and a $900,000 target, you're not crossing over at 65 anymore. You're crossing over around 55. You just bought yourself 10 years of freedom without winning the lottery, starting a unicorn business, or manifesting abundance. Same income. Same market, different math. And if you really get aggressive, lower cost of living, house hacking, fewer fixed expenses, that crossover point moves even closer. This is why the crossover point isn't a fantasy for tech millionaires. It's a math problem most people never bother to solve, and once you do, you stop asking, how do I make more money? And start asking, how fast can I make work optional? Now here's the part nobody warns you about. As you move closer to the crossover point, something weird happens to your brain. Most people think financial independence is a switch. You're either trapped or you're free. That's not how it actually feels. In real life, freedom arrives gradually, in small, almost invisible increments. When you first start investing, every dollar feels painful. It feels like deprivation, like you're sacrificing happiness today for some abstract version of happiness decades from now. Your portfolio goes up $40 one day and down $60 the next, and you wonder why you're even bothering. The crossover point feels like a myth people talk about on the internet. But then, somewhere along the way, something shifts. It usually happens when your portfolio hits somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. The exact number doesn't matter. What matters is the feeling. A 2% market move is no longer lunch money. It's hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. For the first time, you don't just understand compound interest intellectually. You feel it. Your money stops feeling static. It feels alive. And that's when your relationship with work begins to change long before you reach the crossover point. This is what I call the freedom gradient. Let me explain. When your investments generate $300 a month, that's your phone bill covered. At $500 a month, that's your car payment. At $1,000 a month, that's groceries and utilities. At $2,000 a month, most of your non-housing expenses are handled. Each milestone doesn't free you completely, but it gives you options, and options are power. You're less afraid of layoffs. You negotiate harder. You stop tolerating toxic jobs just in case. You can say no without panic. Most people wait for full financial independence to feel free. But freedom actually starts when dependence begins to weaken. And this leads to a concept that almost nobody outside of hardcore finance circles talks about, but it's incredibly important. It's called coast fire. Coast fire is the point where you've invested enough that even if you never invest another dollar, compound interest alone will carry you to your crossover point by traditional retirement age. Let's put numbers on it. Say you're 30 years old and you want $1.2 million by age 60. That's 30 years of growth. At an 8% annual return, you'd need roughly $150,000 invested today to coast there without adding another cent. That's it. If you hit coast fire, your future is mathematically locked in. You don't have to stop working. But you could. You could take a lower paying job you enjoy. You could work part-time. You could stop aggressively saving and start spending more on experiences. You've punched your ticket. And even if you don't choose to coast, understanding this point is psychologically massive. Because it proves something most people never realize. You don't need to reach the crossover point to start reclaiming your life. You just need to start shrinking the gap. This is why people who understand these concepts feel calmer even with less money than people earning six figures who've never run the math. One group sees a path. The other sees an endless grind. And that difference alone changes everything. Now, at this point, I can already hear the objections forming. What about market crashes? What about inflation? What if everything goes wrong? These are fair questions. They're also the exact questions that keep most people stuck forever. So let's deal with them honestly. First, market crashes. Yes, they will happen. Not my will. Your portfolio will drop 20%. At some point, probably 30%. Maybe even 40%. This isn't a bug in the system. It's the system. On average, major market downturns happen every few years. And yet, despite wars, pandemics, recessions, and financial crises, the long-term average return of the stock market still sits around 8 to 10%. Why? Because the number we use already includes all the crashes, every panic, every bubble. Every this time is different. That's the part people miss. When you invest consistently over decades, volatility isn't the enemy, it's fuel. During crashes, you're not withdrawing, you're accumulating. You're buying the same assets at lower prices, which actually accelerates your progress toward the crossover point, even though your balance temporarily looks worse. The math doesn't care how scary the headlines are. It only cares how long you stay in the game. Now, inflation. Yes, prices rise. Your crossover number will increase over time, but so will your portfolio. Stocks are not pieces of paper. They're ownership in companies. And companies raise prices when inflation rises. That flows through to earnings, dividends, and stock prices. This is why equities have historically been one of the best inflation hedges available, and the 4% rule? It was tested against some of the worst inflationary periods in modern history. It held. Is it perfect? No. Is it guaranteed? Nothing is. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The alternative, never investing and relying entirely on your ability to trade time for money until old age, is not safer. It's riskier. You're just trading market risk for health risk, job market risk, age discrimination, economic shocks you can't control. At least with investing, you have a plan. And that plan leads somewhere. Which brings us to the most important part. Understanding the crossover point is useless if it doesn't change how you behave. So here's what I want you to actually do. Not someday. Not when you have more time. Soon. First, calculate your real monthly expenses. Not what you think they are. What they actually are. Look at the last 3 months of bank statements. Add everything. Be honest. Most people discover they're spending 15 to 20% more than they thought. That number is your baseline reality. Second, multiply that monthly number by 12. That's your annual spending. Then multiply that by 25. That number is your crossover target. Write it down. This is the portfolio size that would make work optional for you. Third, look at your current investment balance. Subtract it from your crossover number. That gap is the distance between where you are and financial independence. Fourth, estimate how fast you're closing that gap based on how much you invest each month. You don't need perfection. You need clarity. And finally, ask the question that actually changes lives. How could I shorten this timeline? Could you reduce fixed expenses? Could you invest raises instead of lifestyle upgrades? Could you deploy bonuses or windfalls instead of consuming them? Because here's a reframe that will haunt you in a good way. Every purchase has two costs: the money you spend and the time to crossover you sacrifice. When you buy something expensive, you're not just spending dollars. You're pushing freedom further into the future. And once you see money that way, you never look at spending the same again. I want to leave you with a reframe that completely changed how I see money. Every dollar you spend isn't just money. It's future time. When you choose to spend instead of invest, you're not just buying a thing. You're delaying the day when work becomes optional. That $10,000 upgrade doesn't just cost $10,000. At an 8% return, it becomes $20,000 in about 9 years. $40,000 in 18. $80,000 in 27. That purchase didn't just cost money. It cost months or years of freedom. And I'm not saying never spend on things you enjoy. That's not the point. The point is to see the trade-off clearly. Money isn't just currency. It's stored labor. It's stored time. It's stored choice. The crossover point makes that trade-off visible. Once you understand it, every financial decision becomes a simple question. Is this moving me toward the crossover? Or away from it? Am I buying future freedom? Or selling it? The average person will earn roughly $2 million over their lifetime. And many of them will reach retirement almost entirely dependent on Social Security, about $1,800 a month after working for 45 years. Not because they didn't earn enough, but because every dollar that came in went right back out. The crossover point offers a different path, not an easy one, not a flashy one. A clear one. Save aggressively, invest consistently, reduce expenses intelligently, and give compound interest time to work. The lines will cross. They always do for the people who stick with it. And when they cross, something remarkable happens. You don't get fireworks. No confetti falls from the ceiling. You wake up on a random Tuesday, you make your coffee. You check your accounts out of habit. And you realize that yesterday, while you were living your life, your money worked harder than you did. That's the moment everything changes. Not because you quit your job, but because you could. And that quiet option, the ability to walk away, is what real wealth actually is. If this video helped you see your finances differently, make sure to like it and subscribe for more content that challenges how you think about money. I'll see you in the next one.